Hey guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Zwanda, and in this channel we talk about all things personal finance, understanding all the financial investment vehicles that are out there, making sure that we rightfully use them towards our goals and ultimately achieve that financial freedom. And in today's video I'll be talking about one of the biggest component into achieving financial freedom, or into a building block to building wealth, and that is an emergency fund. I actually have noticed that in the past my videos have not included enough of emergency fund, although it's a key component or building block into financial freedom, into building wealth. I have not covered enough information in how you can go about it. So in this video I'm going to share, I think it's 5 things that can help you to successfully build your emergency fund and can help you to understand it better so that it can be easier for you to build it, for you to have it, for you to understand how it can benefit you. Okay, so I have my notes which are here, and I think the first thing that I want to say is that if you don't have an emergency fund, any emergency can easily become a crisis. Like if you are in a situation, it can easily turn into a crisis very quickly if you don't have an emergency fund. For example, if you get into an accident and then although the insurance is paying, you still need access for you to get that insurance to kick in. If you don't have that access, that means that you have a problem of you getting into an accident, which can even include emotional disturbance. However, you have an additional financial issue, which then exacerbate the size or the magnitude of the problem itself. So when you get into a situation, if you don't have an emergency fund, it can easily turn into crisis. And building an emergency fund just helps us to have that, stress less situation, deal with situations for what they are, because not having money when we are in a situation just causes a stressful situation to be even more stressful. So that's why we are trying by all means to make sure that we build our emergency fund. Another point that I want to make before we can get into the details of the video is that it's very important that if you have debt, that you focus on paying those, especially small debts. It's important for you to start by focusing on paying those so that you can get the money that is locked in into those small installments to prioritize paying off of your or setting up your emergency. You have no business building a long-term emergency fund if you still have like your clothing account where you're paying 500. Close that thing and reallocate the money that you are paying there, whether it's a phone contract or so forth. Close it so that you can reallocate that money that you have there into building your emergency fund, right? So like I said, emergency fund is the first step into building financial freedom. Why do I say that? Is when you have an emergency fund, you get to just be stable and focus on the goals that you've set for yourself. However, if you do not, what happens is every single time you have an emergency, you're most likely to withdraw from whatever it is that you've been saving for. If you're saving for maybe buying a new house and you're saving for transfer cost and registration cost and you don't have an emergency fund, if an emergency fund does happen, it means there's no buying of a house for you. That means you need to withdraw money from your transfer cost and registration cost for you to cater for emergency. Some people start saving without building an emergency, and what actually happens is when emergency does happen, you're gonna withdraw from the investment that were meant to carry you over a long period of time, over a long term, like a long-term investment, finding yourself withdrawing from a tax-free savings account. Unfortunately, that is not a good approach. Hence, it's important for you to build this foundation of an emergency fund before you can even start contributing month on month towards your savings, towards your investment. And we're going to talk about how to go about that just now, right? So something that I want to encourage you on is that if you want to do something that you have never done, like building an emergency fund, you should be willing to try something you have never tried, meaning that you should be willing to put in a bit of some sacrifices for you to achieve this. Because if it's your first time building an emergency fund, your life will never be the same as when you didn't have that emergency fund. So just keep that in mind, because sometimes when we speak about emergency fund and we speak about 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses, people go like, where should I get that money, right? It's the same money. It's the same money that you're spending on particular things. It's just reallocating of the money. So hence I'm saying that you should be willing to change a bit so that you can get things that you've never done to be done, to achieve things that you've never achieved, right? So what is an emergency fund? Personally, I believe that an emergency fund is a do it myself insurance, right? We have insurances for our car, we have insurances for our house, we have insurances for our house content, we have insurances for a lot of things, disability cover and so forth, multiple policies, right? However, there is such a thing as being overinsured, especially considering various levels of income, right? You can be overinsured and you can spend too much money into insurances, right? So when you have covered the main things, your car, your house, and so forth, sometimes you just want to build an emergency fund to cater for everything else that has not been covered by insurances. Sometimes something like medical aid can only cover you to a certain extent. An emergency fund can help you to stay a day, 2 days, 3 days longer at a hospital for you to get the care that you need outside of what the medical aid can do. So it is a very important aspect that can help us to better ourselves in case of crisis. Another point that I want to make is that an emergency fund is not an investment. In as much as, yes, we need to put it at a place where it can grow a bit, we need to be cautious that it's not a place where we need to just make wealth. It's we're insuring ourselves, and insurance cost us money. It costs us money, it doesn't make us money, right? At the same time, what insurance does is that it covers us, it protects us in case of an emergency. So you would only see the reality or the power of emergency fund most of the time when you're going through the emergency itself. Because think about it, you are at a hospital and they can only cover you for a certain, this is the only example that's coming to mind, but they can only cover a certain extent, and you need another procedure that they cannot cover. How sad would it be for you to be discharged without getting the care that you need, simply because your insurance, your medical cover cannot, cover you 100%. Of course, there's such a thing called gap cover, but you have a gap cover for a car, you have a gap cover for medical aid, you have a gap cover for this. So having an emergency fund can help you to collectively build your own gap cover, or collectively build your own do-it-myself insurance, to say that at any point, if I happen to be in a circumstances, an emergency, then I can still be able to live my life, and just go on. So there is that. So it is this, financial net that just gives you, like, stability, like, mental peace when you're going through circumstances. So another thing that I wanted to cover is that you have to define what an emergency is for you, so that for what are you going to withdraw this money. Because some people, then when they see 30% of the boots that they've been looking for, and they find it in the perfect color, the perfect size, they get that handbag, then they tap into the in an emergency. So when you set the rule of engagement for your emergency fund, you're kind of protecting yourself against yourself. If there's something that I always say, is that discipline is the number one self-care that you can have for yourself. So if you put in rules of engagement, at least you're putting that boundaries for yourself to never cross. And of course, you are the one setting them up, therefore you can respect them. So in terms of emergency, some of the things that just came to mind is if your car needs a repair, if home maintenances, there's something broke at home, or job loss, or maybe you lost a phone. Those can be emergencies that may need for you to withdraw a certain amount of money to use it. So before we can get into like how much do you need to save, I want to speak about the two types of emergencies. This can help you a lot in figuring out how do you successfully build an emergency fund, right? There are two types. One is a short term, the second one is a long term, and I know that Dave Ramsey speaks about this on his 7 baby steps of building financial wellness, I believe. So there's a short-term emergency fund and there's a long-term emergency fund. How do they differ? The short-term one covers immediate things and a short-term things. For an example, if something breaks in the house, like your microwave, it's an emergency, but it's a short-term and it needs a replacement now, right? The long-term, on the other hand, it's, you know, illness, sicknesses, medical bills, job loss. It's life-altering circumstances that requires money. That is a long-term emergency. So how do you go about structuring them and combining them and making sure that you cater for both? So the thing is, in terms of funds, it's not separated. However, you may want to be aggressive when it comes to saving for a short-term emergency fund and slow down to build a long-term emergency fund, because one of the most important things is to understand that you don't have to have all your emergency fund all at once, right? So you don't have to have all of it all at once. So when you have an understanding that you have a short-term emergency fund that can be maybe approximately 1 month to 3 months of your living expenses, and a long-term one being 3 months to 6 months of your living expenses, then at least you can be aggressive, possibly save for the first 12 months, you save all of it, the emergency that's needed, the short-term emergency in the 12 months, you make it your priority. Because you cannot save and invest without having an emergency fund. Build that foundation. However, the long-term one, you can gradually build it, maybe over a period of 2 years, contributing smaller amounts ongoing through debit orders. Right, so that's what differentiates a short-term one and a long-term one. And of course, the key components to emergency is that it has to be accessible, because you don't want to have an emergency fund, but when you get into an emergency, you can't access that money, right? So either the long-term one or the short-term one. Preferably in the long-term one, because it's more money, you may want to put it in a fixed or 32 days notice type of an account, where at least you know you have a 30 days notice that you have to put, like a notice deposit type, right? So at least it's still accessible, but you have to put a notice. Okay, so that differentiates. So in terms of how much do you need to save on an emergency, I've already said the general rules of, in the short term one, it could be 1 month to 3 months. In the long term one, it could be 3 to 6 months, right? However, you know, it's not a one size fit all. Of course, you can define what it looks like for you based on, you know, what you see fit, what you can afford at that particular point in time, and then build it gradually. I think the key is that you do something to ensure that you are building it, so that when emergency comes, you know, it doesn't turn into crisis, because that's what we are trying to avoid, because things have ripple effect, because you may find yourself relying on credit cards, on personal loan, and once you start there, it's just adding more stress to the stressful situation. So, and then most of the time, you will never even recover. You will spend too much time recovering from the situation that has happened, but also recovering from the loan that you took to rescue yourself from the financial component of the situation. So just try by all means to like start. When it comes to how much, define it yourself, and those rules of engagement that I said, you know, you need to incorporate them, so that you know that, okay, for now I just want to keep, let's say 6,000 rand, I'm just gonna get to save 500 rand each month, knowing very well that in 12 months I will have 6,000 rand, and maybe on the following year then I'll go aggressive. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I'm saying I want you to understand that personal finance is personal. There could be circumstances that are preventing you from going aggressive on the short term, or using the 12 months rule or the 18 months rule to save the short term, because there are some things, maybe debt, that you want to repay first. But even then, you can still define whatever it is that is suitable for you for that particular year, when you still have other things to do, right? And I've already said that the biggest component is to know that you need to start small, and you just have to be consistent when it comes to this. It's important to remember that, you know, when it comes to your emergency, or whatever it is that you're putting as the amount that you want to contribute, you need to consider expenses that you've already have that already exist, right? And that would mean that maybe sometimes you may need to downgrade your lifestyle so that you can build up an emergency fund, right? There's one thing that I always tell my mentees. By the way, I have a mentorship program. It's an 8 weeks program. We talk about all things personal finance. We also have one-on-one sessions in between to focus on goals that are specific for my mentees. So I always tell my mentees that there's something that happens when you have fully funded your emergency fund. There's a certain level of confidence that comes to you, certain level of approach to your personal finance journey, certain level of approach you have to your goal setting mentality when you have a solid reserve that you know can protect you in case of either job loss, in case of you get sick. There's a certain level of approach that gets unlocked, and you really need to focus on getting there so that you can think differently. It's the same thing that I tell people who give money to their parents, maybe through black tax or supporting family, whichever word you prefer, right? I always tell them that it is better to give them lump sum than to give them month to month money, especially if you're just giving them and it's not for groceries, because if it's groceries, of course they need to buy them month on month. The reason I say this is because when someone has a lump sum, they have an ability to think bigger to match the amount that they have. For example, if you give me 10,000, I can even think about buying a fridge, buying couches, buying a TV. However, if you give me 1,000 rand, all I'm thinking about is buying KFC, and you realize that the money that you're sending home is not doing anything tangible because you're sending bits by bits, right? However, if you can send a lump sum of money, maybe keep it to yourself, those 1,000, keep it to yourself until they're 6,000 rand, and then send that 6,000 rand. And when you send, challenge the person you're giving to say, what do you want to buy? That was me taking a detour, but I was just trying to say that when you have a lot of money, you think bigger. When you have a lump sum of money, you think bigger. Even if it doesn't mean you're going to spend your emergency fund, but the mere fact that you have it, you can think bigger when it comes to things that you can achieve in regards to personal finance. Okay, I think I have 2 more points before we can close it. This video is becoming too long. So another question that I get when it comes to emergency fund is, where should I save the money, right? And this is a great question because I've already said that the money should be accessible, but the second component is that at least it should keep up with inflation, meaning that you should be earning some interest that exceeds inflation, because we don't want your money to lose value over time. So you want to look into an account that can give you some interest rate, however accessible account. So to be practical about how to build the short-term one and the long-term one, you may have a 7 days notice where you're saving every month. You're putting it there, and then you may have a 32 days notice as well. So let's say you're putting 500 rand, right? You're putting it on the 7 days notice. As soon as it reaches 6,000, you may want to take that 6,000 and put it on the 32 days notice so that it can help you to start building that long-term one. All right, that's another way in which you can do it. Another way is to save through access bond. Access bond is a facility that allows you to put money into your bond, money that is withdrawable. Most of the time is when you have a house loan, like a home loan, right? So you can call your bank and ask them to open up an access bond, and you can put money at any time there, and you can also withdraw it at any time. What that does is that at the time in which you're not using that money, it's preventing you from paying high interest because the principal amount is reduced. So most people actually do it that way because it helps them. At some point, they're probably going to just close their bond because they have too much money on their access account, and then they can start over in building that emergency fund, right? So you can consider using that method as well. So the last point that I want to mention is that there is a building of habit that comes with saving for an emergency. So consider automating whatever it is that you want to put away as your emergency. Like maybe if it's 1,000 rand, get it debited so that it can go off on the day in which your creditors are taking a component of their money as well, and then so that you don't get to think about it on a month to month, and then cumulatively in 12 months you have that 12,000 rand. So get it debited into your 32 days notice. Another account you can consider is Time Bank Goal Save account, because if you're if you are consistent in depositing money consecutively for 3 months, it can give you interest rate of up to 10%, and that is good enough so that your money can keep on maintaining its value. So there is such things that you can consider, but however, it sharpens the discipline. There is money you're putting away. As soon as you're done with saving for your emergency fund, there's nothing you cannot do, because the discipline about money, the beauty about it is that when you get it right, you get it forever. Although you may keep on sharpening the muscle just so you can keep on being frugal and keep on focusing on achieving your goals. However, the beauty is when you've seen that it works, and there's no coming back to that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have watched until the end, because this is a 20 minutes video, I would say give me a pink heart and you will win yourself 200 Rand. Goodbye.